Or two earlier that I didn't have. And you'll notice the title, Sunstroke and Ankle Deep Mud. And that's what this is all about. So we're going to hit Sunstroke. Minor problem when Hooker started moving up here. It was the hottest week of the year. This is my Sunstroke presentation outfit. Nice, huh? What I'm wearing is a First Manassas sesquicentennial commemoration. Did anyone attend that a couple years ago? Does anyone remember what kind of weather existed? You had to have seen it on TV or heard about it. It wasn't just hot. They shut this celebration or commemoration down every afternoon at noon because the weather was so hot. They had tents out there with coolers, buses going all the time with air conditioning. It was terrible. It was well over 100 degrees. That's what I want you to think about right now, because that's the way it was back then. We got the temperatures from the Georgetown facility, and it was up to 99 degrees for the first week in the shade. And as you well know, you got a jack on at least 10 degrees if you're in the sun. So that's what they faced. As you all read this is Tully, Lieutenant Tully McCrae. He was 2nd Corps, again we're following him, Artillery Brigade, and you can read what's read. A great many died on the road with sunstroke. This is General Alpheus Williams, 12th Corps, and you'll hear more about these two individuals later on. And you can hear and see what he had to say also. Basically, they were losing men all the time by sunstroke. They were all falling out all the time. Now just envision this army, 85,000 men coming up Telegraph Road. There were no bridges. There were no lights. So at night, totally dark. Now, this could be argued. There were no 4-lane roads. So if you've ever gone down 95, which we all have, the Army probably would have beat the traffic today. But anyway, enough of that. However, the roads were all severely potholed and topped by an inch of fine silt. So as soon as they started marching, within 10, 15 minutes, they were covered with dust. They had an inch of dust on them. General Williams also commented that he saw many wagons fall into the ravines as they were marching, coming up, and they were trying to march a little bit in the evening too. And it was so dark they didn't even know where the road was, quite frankly. Hancock, who Brian mentioned earlier, who was a commander for the 2nd Corps, he was bringing up the right wing of the Army. So he was in the rear. And he wrote to General Hooker finding an overwhelming number of stragglers from all the corps along the route. And he kept having to send back ambulances, wagons basically, to pick them up, ongoing. He also argued for the movement at night, so it was cooler.
Jim mentioned the route, and this is basically the route. It's a 46-mile route across, beginning on the Occoquan River in Fairfax County. It goes up in through Prince William and ends up in Loudoun. It starts down here at Wolf Run Shoals, Fairfax Station, a place called Sangster Station, which doesn't exist anymore. We've got the historical information about it. Old Centerville, the 2nd Manassas Battlefield, up the route here to the area near Edwards Ferry in Loudoun. That's where the golf courses are for Rivercrest and Lansdowne. That's where the bridges were put across. And as Jim also pointed out, we have uncovered some historically rich points of interest along the way. So we've added those into the booklet as we picked up. It is, we think, across parts of Virginia that with the old Virginia roads that have been macadam over, and then others that you're going to end up with is under new development. Parts of the route falls under the northbound lane on Braddock Road. Parts of it up in Ashburn, if you've been up there with the development, that they're 4-laning Ashburn roads, and we know where the routes are. Some we had to detail and a detour around to get you back on the old road. But the Second Corps started in Northern Virginia right here at Wolf Run Shoals, which is our first stop. And what we're showing up here is that Wolf Run Shoals was a strategic crossing, and it has a lot of history to it. This particular area right here, Mike, excuse me, this particular area right here is the Washington Rochambeau wagon route. And in 1781, Washington ordered a crossing to be made across the Occoquan River, which was very narrow at that particular point. But there were 3 islands down there, and I'll point that out in a minute. But that's what this is, this particular point, to take the French and the American Army down to Yorktown and then back after the war. During the North and South, it was used by both sides as it came in here. And if you take this little forest trail, which is part of the route that we have, it parallels that road down to the Occoquan. When you get down to the Occoquan, you're looking right straight across into Prince William County. Now, why can't you see the islands? That's because when the Occoquan Reservoir was created back in the early 1900s, 1920s, between 1920 and 1950, it has raised the level of the Occoquan River up about 25 or 30 feet. So those fords, or the shoals, are all submerged underneath it. This is a sketch that was made by the second officer, Lieutenant Colonel Farnham, in the 2nd Vermont, which was one of the Vermont regiments that was guarding the shoals in June of 1863. And here's those little 3 islands. This road is Wolf Run Shoals Road that comes down, cuts across the long one, picks up in Prince William Round, and becomes Wolf Run Shoals over in Prince William County. We've also found out this actually became a Virginia State Road 610 for a period of time until about 1930. And then now you see what it looks like. The units that were guarding this particular point were initially in the beginning of the war were parts of cavalry, and then there was a very great incident that took place in Fairfax Courthouse in March of 1863. There was a general that was captured by Mosby's Rangers. Well, that general was in charge of the 2nd Vermont Brigade, and his name was Stout. Subsequently, within the area over there, the points along the Occoquan down to where it joins with the Potomac, all the way up to Bull Run, were strengthened, and there were 2 or 3 regiments that ended up at Wolf Run Shoals. Now, the new general that took over was a man by the name of Stannard, and this is the 2nd Vermont Brigade. And please remember that, because they'll come up again in our talk. The road probably comes down right across the top here. There were some artillery positions that were there, campsites, and Jim and I are in the process of trying to get approval from Fairfax County to erect a Civil War Trails marker at the end of Wolf Run Shoals. We're starting that process now. This particular piece is if you're looking down towards the river at the end of Wolf Run Shoals Road. One ridge line over, there's a creek called Wolf Run. And at the end of that was this, and this is Ford's Mill, which is now under about 30 feet of water. The foundations of the mill that are under about 30 feet of water. That's where this particular piece sets up. Jim?
Okay. Fairfax Station. Down Ox Road on the other side, south of Fairfax Courthouse, today's Fairfax. The 1st and 2nd Corps wagon trains resupplied themselves here and waited for the units to come up from Dumfries. Fairfax Station was a logistical supply point and transportation hub for the Union. Early in the war, the United States Military Railroad, Federal, took over all the railroads, even took over the Bike Trail, which was the Alexandria, Loudon, and Hampshire Railroad, very early in the war. So at that point, early in the war, they started garrisoning this area and protecting this supply point and logistical area from the local partisan Rangers, which was the predecessor to Mosby and his Rangers. The upper photo is a period photo looking at this museum, and this is the 4th railroad station that was built 1903. First one built 1852, and that was the one that was around during the Civil War. It's down by the tracks. It was burned by the Union right after Second Manassas, so they rebuilt it afterwards. And again, this is a fort. But if you're standing right here and looking across the hill, that's the view that anybody standing on the other side of the hill would have looking at this railroad station. And you can see the current location of the museum, which is this right here, right up here. Here's a wagon train and St. Mary's Catholic Church. If you drive down Ox Road, you cannot miss St. Mary's Catholic Church. There it is. Okay? Searching for Lee. Remember early on I said that the Union was trying like heck to find out where Lee was. So we have Ewell already up here in Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, Curtin, the governor for Pennsylvania, was screaming, help. I mean, I equate it to Christie during Sandy. That's the deal. Because he knew that and had heard reports that Lee's army, fully strength, was coming up into Pennsylvania, and I guess Ewell's corps had been located up there, and he was raising heck, and he said, hey, what are you going to do for me? So there was a lot of political heat on Washington to do something. Reacting to the rebel cavalry at Point of Rocks, where 15 crosses Potomac River today, Hooker ordered the 12th Corps, remember General Alpheus Williams early on, to occupy and secure Leesburg in anticipation of having to cross the Potomac to go north. Still uncertain about Lee's intentions, Hooker repositioned his corps, protecting all the various approaches to Washington. Also, Hooker sent his cavalry to Aldie, Middleburg, Upperville, that area, trying to locate where Lee's army is. And their objective was to get to the Blue Ridge Mountains and look over the mountains into the Shenandoah Valley and see if they could find Lee's army. Now, Lee, you know, he's got about 80,000 men. You would think you could spot him. They couldn't. So, what's interesting, there's a thing called a battle, numerous battles that took place out there right before Gettysburg called the Prelude to Gettysburg. And it's a series of cavalry battles. We were talking earlier about Stuart going up Route 50, quite frankly. And, the Army of the Potomac and the cavalry fighting Stuart out there. Stuart was successful in thwarting that effort. However, the Union troops were able, the cavalrymen were able to assess that, hey, it sounds like from the locals that Lee's army had crossed up there and somebody had seen them. So they reported back to Hooker. So Hooker had been apprised that, hey, we think that's what happened. We didn't see it, but we believe that's what occurred.